Welcome to the Independent Tinker. Today we're going to be rotating the tires on our BMW 530e because our rear tires are at 5/30 seconds tread depth. Our front tires are at 8/30 seconds tread depth. You might be thinking that's backwards, but my wife says she always drives a BMW like it's supposed to be driven. It also is a hybrid, so when you brake, your first braking action is done by the electric motor, and because it's rear-wheel drive, it all goes through the rear wheels. So I'm assuming the acceleration and deceleration of going on in the rear wheels is why we have more wear at the back than the front. We're also going to use our Amsoil brake and parts cleaner, and once we have the wheels off the car, we're going to apply Amsoil's Mudslinger to the wheels. We will not be applying these to the brake parts or the rotors because it says not to. They get too hot and we'll burn this off. I'm using hand tools today to show you it can be done without having a professional shop. We've got a 17mm socket that I've put painter's tape on. We've got our racing jack, and we have some pieces of wood off the mill. I put painter's tape on the socket here to try to keep from marring up the wheel. Also doing this by hand instead of with power tools will give me more control. All I'm doing here before I put it up on blocks is breaking the torque, and we're going to break loose the bolts. How BMW tells you to tighten them is by a star pattern. So just go to the lug nut. Well, these are studs actually. The bolts, lug bolts. Go to the one opposite you just loosened up. And now we'll do the front ones. Again, we'll do it in a star pattern. When rotating tires, especially on performance vehicles, you need to look at the tire and see if it indicates which way the tire is supposed to rotate. We don't have to, but today we're just going to move the rear tire to the front and the front to the rear, keep them on the same side. If you have directional tires, it'll say on the sidewall. These tires only tell us that this side needs to face outward. There's no directional rotation for these tires. So we could put them on the other side, but we're just going to move them front to back. We're not seeing any odd wear patterns that would require us to move it from side to side. I have made a spacer out of oak, and it goes into these, they call it's a puck. This is how you're supposed to lift the vehicle on a BMW, right there, which at the BMW dealer they will have the correct adapter. If you go to an independent shop, they may or may not, when they lift it up, they may start crushing the piece that BMW puts in there for you to lift on. So I made an adapter so that I don't crush it. We have the rear brakes set, the park and brake. So we'll keep the other side on the ground to keep this thing from rolling. So I'm going to put some wood blocks off of the mill underneath the rear subframe. This should hold the car up without bending or damaging anything under here. If you can look, you can see the rear subframe goes from the left driver's side over here. So it's a major structure of the car, and we're going to drop the jack and hope that everything has been calculated correctly. There we go. Now we'll go to the front. All right, now we're going to take the lug bolts out. You can see our racing jack in the background. So this is why they're called lug bolts. We don't have studs that you put a nut on. For some reason, the Germans like to use bolts. I forgot I have an Amsoil parts holder. It has a magnetic base, but I'm not going to stick it to anything, but it will hold the bolts for me. So you don't need a fancy shop or fancy equipment to work on a fancy car. Oh, that one is not quite loose. Since we have the rear brake set, parking brake set, the wheel won't turn on me. It might be because it's the last one. The wheel is putting the pressure on that last one. All right. I'm going to pull this off and you'll see that the wheel centers here and here, and then you just put the bolts in to hold the wheel on. Unlike a car that has studs with the lug nuts, they call them acorn nuts. They look like that. That can be what centers the wheel. So we're going to take this outside, clean it off with the Amsoil braking parts cleaner, and then apply Mudslinger to it. All right, we moved out away from the building in the driveway. And we're going to clean the inside first. A lot of times, this is where road tar. Hi, ducks. We have visitors. A lot of times the inside of the wheel can be dirtier than the outside. And I put it on the cardboard here so that when I put the wheel down, I don't scratch the paint off the rim. Anybody who's owned a European vehicle has probably noticed that they tend to leave a lot of brake dust on the wheels, and that is due to the brake pad compound that they use. Creates a lot of brake dust. So if these pads ever wear out, which I doubt they ever will because this is a hybrid, we might look into putting ceramic pads or something else that doesn't create so much dust. But we're going to add the Mudslinger to it, and that will help cleaning off the brake dust. A very, very simple task. If you saw the Stihl 462 chainsaw unboxing, took a brand new chainsaw and put Amsoil's Mudslinger on it. I wish I had done that to this. when it was brand new. We have about 22,000 miles on the car now, and we've never cleaned this brake dust off. And you might think that isn't crazy. That builds up in about 1,000 miles on my car. Well, that's because this is a hybrid, and most of the braking is done by the electric motor. So we don't have a whole lot of brake dust built up because of that. As well as this is the rear wheel. All right, now we'll apply the Amsoil Mudslinger. Give it a good shake, as the directions on the back say. Gonna do the inside. This is to keep road tar from adhering to the inside of the wheel, as well as brake dust. But I'm more concerned about the road tar. And we'll get the front. So it looks pretty. There's quite a bit in the bottle. Same bottle I used, or can, excuse me, for the chainsaw. So we'll let that dry, and then we'll wipe off the excess, because the excess will attract dust, which you can leave on, just we want them to look pretty. Interesting, you can see a perfect brake pad outline left on the wheel, or the rotor. All right, we're going to take our Amsoil brake and parts cleaner and clean off the rotor and the caliper. It says that it is safe to use on all the parts, including the rotor. I put this piece of cardboard underneath so that I'm not dripping straight onto the concrete. One thing about the 5 Series is that they use what BMW calls an aluminum hat right here. 3 Series does not have that. 5 Series does. I think it's about dissipating heat easier. Clean up this M labeled caliper, red caliper. let's go out and clean off the wheel. Right, now we're gonna swap out the front tire and the rear tire. So I'm just gonna leave this on the jack because it's just gonna be a real quick swap out after I clean off the brake with Amsoil brake and parts cleaner. And you may be saying to yourself, this is the shadiest shade tree mechanicing I've seen. And it may be, but the point is to show you, you can do this yourself. Doesn't take too much. Just got hand tools and a jack and some blocks of wood. And when we put the wheels back on, we will torque them. So you will need a torque wrench to get them to the proper spec, which I would highly suggest if you have a 5 series, because like I said, you have these aluminum hats that you are bolting into. So don't want to have too much torque or too little torque, but don't want to warp our aluminum hat here. All right, our last one. Now we can remove the wheel. Careful about that, because it's only being held on right there, and I pushed too far with the front and caused it to fall off. So we'll get our cardboard underneath our front wheel, spray it down, shake the can first, make sure to get the mounting points. Again, it is safe to spray this on the brake parts. All right. Look at that red M brake caliper start to shine. It was being hidden by all the brake dust. Oh yeah, that is looking good. My wife was just commenting that it looked a lot better when it was new. So we'll get that cleaned up, and then we're going to mount the rear tire on the front. So want to make sure that the mounting surface here is clean, that we don't have anything sticking up in the way that would prevent our wheel from mounting squarely to it. And look at the shine on that wheel. So this does get a little tricky. You gotta get the center of the hub on there. There we go. And then rotate until we can get a bolt lug lined up. So this being the front, it does not have a brake holding it. Just gotta make sure the rotor is not spinning. And we've got one bolt lined up. before I let the jack drop the wheel down back on the ground, I want to get these bolts pretty snug so that they are lined up in the wheel and I don't put the car's weight down on the wheel and it not be centered. So I'm just holding it with my left hand and tighten it up enough that I'm confident when it is dropped back down, the weight is put on the wheel, that the wheel will be centered where it needs to be. And then we're going to torque them. The torque spec is 140 Newton meters, I believe, which I have an older torque wrench. If you might see it says Caterpillar or Cat there. I worked at a Caterpillar dealership many years ago. So the conversion from 140 Newton meters is roughly 103 foot-pounds. So I've set the torque wrench. We're going to drop the car down. All right, now that the weight of the car is on this wheel, we can torque it. Again, we're going to tighten in a star pattern or just go across from where you're at. So we'll start here, we'll come here, go here, number 4, and then down to number 5. Alright, and I'm going to do that again. I have not put any anti-seize or oil or friction modifiers on these bolts. That will affect the torque that you put these at. So they came off with nothing on them, so they went back on with nothing on them. Now we'll go out, clean what was the front wheel, now going to be the rear wheel, and then we'll install it on the rear of the car. I've cleaned the wheel off, sprayed it with Mudslinger. I would say it looks showroom ready. It's got a nice glossy look to it. Much better than the dusty, dull, metallic look. Oh, trying to lift this into place. There we go. See if I can't get this. Nice thing about the rear wheel is parking brake is holding the hub in place. And our Amsoil parts holder has kept the lug bolts conveniently together instead of me kicking them and sending them all across the shop. Doing this by hand also helps make sure that you get everything in where it's supposed to be. These bolts are, if you have lug nuts, they don't get cross-threaded, because that is not a fun day when you have to drive some wheel studs out and put new ones in. So what I'm saying is, it's okay to work on a vehicle with hand tools. May take longer, but because you are slower, you can pay attention to the details. And since the parking brake is holding this wheel from rotating, we can go ahead and torque it right here. So again, I'll snug up these going in a star pattern, and then we'll get our torque wrench and torque them to about 103 foot-pounds. It's important when you're using a torque wrench to push where you're supposed to. Right here, we have the knurled grip. That's where your hand needs to be. Otherwise, you could change the torque that you are putting the nut or bolt to if you were to push anywhere else. And there we have done one side of rotating, cleaning, and applying Amsoil Mudslinger. Now on to the next side. Well, we found the screw that was leaking the air out of this tire. So we're gonna plug it. All right, this is probably verboten to put a plug in this tire, but that is what I'm gonna do. I've never had trouble plugging a tire before. As far as, oh look at that, it's a machine screw. I'll throw that away. All right, You can hear the air leaking out of the tire. First thing you do is use this reamer tool. You gotta make this hole big enough for the plug to fit through, so don't be afraid to ream it out. And then take this other tool and you take the plug and feed it through the, it's like a needle. There's a hole and the end is split, though you can't see that because it's been used a few times. There we go. All right, then we put the rubber cement on it. And without twisting, you're supposed to push it through, which is why you need to ream it. Well, guess I need to ream it a little better. Put a little air in this tire, give it some resistance to my pushing. Well, if you remember, I said I've never had trouble with these. As long as you don't modify them. For some reason, I had cut the plug shorter, and right before I pushed it into the tire, I thought, you know, that's probably where I should leave it. I pushed it one more time, and the plug went in the tire. So hopefully, it hasn't cemented itself to the tire pressure monitoring sensor there. But we'll start over. So we had to go out and get some more plugs. So back to reaming the hole. So take your standard size plug, unmodified, Leo. And then thread the needle with that. There we go. Before I put the rubber cement on there, I need to put more air in the tire so I have some resistance. Alright, Leo. Leo, come here. Alright, hopefully, second time's the charm. There we go. Much better. And then you just pull this straight out without rotating it around. There we go. Much easier when you have the right parts and equipment. Alright, I'll get these torqued up to spec. I'll get the tires filled to where they're supposed to be. Even though they're the exact same tire, front to rear, they do have different PSI requirements. And you can find that on your driver's door jamb. So, if you would like to protect your vehicle, including the wheels, with Amsoil, please go to the independenttinker.shopamsoil.com, which is in the link in the description below. This looks like it's showroom ready, and if you like to take your car to car shows, this is a great way to make it look good. Protect it with Mudslinger, take it to the show, clean it off, and if you want that wet look, you can reapply it at the show. Thank you for joining me today on The Independent Tinker.